over the last few months, you really do have to congratulate many Australian businesses and how they've acted during the pandemic. Energy companies and telecommunications giants have suspended disconnections. Banks have offered repayment holidays. Supermarkets have managed panic in the aisles and prioritised deliveries to the elderly and those with disabilities. But the most common way that businesses have acted was to introduce work-from-home measures to protect the health of their staff. In many cases, they preempted the government, not just by halting essential travel, but also introducing special and innovative working-from-home arrangements. But winning the war is one thing, and winning the peace is entirely another. Many large companies have declared that their offices will stay closed until the end of the year at least. But those work-from-home arrangements that seemed like such a godsend in March will start to look very, very differently as time goes on. I say this because I imagine that those at the top of these major companies, people who are making the big decisions about their staff's life, have a very different idea about what working from home looks like. Clean surfaces and up-to-date hardware, a reliable data connection, a desk, a room with a front door, relative peace and safety. Now, if you're a millennial or someone earning south of the median income, there is very little chance that you're taking any of these things for granted. In August, when I reopened the McKell Institute, I was keen to see how many staff would turn up, and on the first day, we had a full house. The reason was free heating. For many Australians earning less than the average, heating and cooling a house all day long, 7 days a week, is a big impact on the family budget. And that's just the half of it. Many younger staff don't live alone. They share with flatmates and they're working off communal dining tables, hoping to eke out just enough peace and quiet in the day to be productive. And then there are those families who are squeezed into tiny little studio apartments. Some employers have provided computers to the staff, and that's great. But their responsibilities don't end by being outsourced to JB Hi-Fi. Employers will need to find ways to provide safe and productive spaces for their staff. Now, whether that's in-home or out of home. That might mean providing some car spaces so staff can drive into the office. That might mean providing access to small co-working spaces closer to home, perhaps in regional communities. Either way, bosses will need to start thinking anew, start thinking seriously about this new normal. Work from home is here to stay, but if we want to go well in the long term, we'll need fresh thinking. So, Tanvir, are you with me and you can't stand working from home? Or...
Look, I'm terrible working from home. My wife has sent me on my way, to be honest. There's only so many people that can work from home. But look, you bring up some really interesting issues, and some of them quite disparate, quite different. So one, just costs of heating is a great one to begin with, because only today it was announced that the government will attempt to subsidise gas. And I know gas is a very interesting issue on the Labor Party side, because you've got people... I mean, one, there's a big push now on the Liberal Party side, you know, to do more drilling, try and bring down the price of gas, drill where, you know, it's been controversial to deal, be it fracking and the like. And this is a testy issue for the Labor Party. You've got people like Joel Fitzgibbon who support more drilling and other groups who do not. But everyone supports cheaper gas. But, you know, there's some... I guess there's some tension about working out how we do that. So that's one aspect that your editorial brings. But in terms of the broader workplace, I mean, this is quite close to my work because I'm often having to assess people around work claims and things like bullying, and the whole nature of that is changing a great deal. And even, I mean, think about it, for most of human history, we basically did work from home. Like we worked, you know, we're kind of on farms or agriculture, this kind of stuff. And it was the Industrial Revolution that took us away from home. Suddenly we were in factories for a while, then we were in offices. And now it's almost like we're coming back home for many people. And suddenly it'll reward different things. So arguably this phase of history, especially in offices and the service sector, has kind of rewarded a certain type of person. And most of us on the panel would be that sort of person where, you know, a bit more extroverted, you might be a good self-presenter, you're good at networking or persuading. But arguably that type of person may go down a notch when we're all working from home. Suddenly those skills won't be quite as valuable as they once were. And maybe, so it's time, like, it's like the introverts are on the rise again. So I think that's a very interesting potential shift that comes out of this as well.
Speak for yourself there on the extrovert interest. Catherine, where are you?
Sam, I have some sympathy with what you're saying, and it's a fair assessment, but a very fair assessment of a very narrow band of the workforce. We look at these alarming statistics. I think 3,300 frontline health workers sick during this pandemic. They don't get to work from home. The people stacking shelves at Woolworths, many of whom were in more lucrative employment 6 months ago before hard lockdown, don't get to work from home. A lot of the people who would have once been in the core constituency of your party have to front up regardless of the risk. It's okay if you're in a mega law firm or one of the big four accountancy firms or a think tank or, in my case, a freelance writer. Yes, you can work from home and it's viable. And Bernard Saltz tracked some interesting points there about people deciding that more achievable home prices are available in very livable regional cities. But by gee, that is very much a class-driven thing. You know, people like us with a head start in life get to make those kinds of choices. But the poor people who are slugging it out, you know, in frontline manually determined work, stacking shelves, operating coal mines, cleaning up the garbage, hospitality, they just don't have that option. And so I think it's a valid point, but it's a point that doesn't impact all that widely, frankly.
And Daisy, what do you think? Am I hopelessly myopic or on to something here?
No, I think you're onto something. I think you've raised some really good points. You know, and I work from home as a general rule because obviously I'm a YouTuber, so I do all the writing, editing, and filming at home in my one sort of small little room at the back of the house. And even for someone who is set up for it as a habit, even I find it difficult sometimes at the best of times. I mean, you know, whether it's neighbours who've decided they're going to have a party, or it's construction, or it's terrible, crushing sort of loneliness or going stir crazy. I mean, it can be quite challenging for people who are used to it, let alone a whole lot of people who've sort of been chucked into doing it. I mean, to expect them to give the same level of productivity if you're 22 and living in a share house and trying desperately to be a paralegal with 5 other people around you eating hot chips. I mean, it's a little bit difficult, but I think what we also need to bear in mind with this new sort of working from home thing, which will become quite prevalent even after the pandemic, and I'm going to sound like a giant lefty here, Sam, which you'll love, is that it has the potential to become very exploitative of workers. And what I mean by that is if you're working in an office, you're there for a set amount of hours a day at specific times, and so you work between the hours of 9 to 5, you go home and you're not necessarily expected to be on call. Well, if employers of, say, big companies are selling this new, optional, you can work from home, but not setting any guidelines around that, well, that can turn into, yes, your hours are flexible, but that means you're on call all the time, and we can email you late at night, and you can always be on the work phone. So it ends up this sort of 24-hour call cycle, which means that employers will just be able to squeeze extra hours of essentially unpaid labour out of their employees. So while work from home, I agree, is certainly here to stay after the pandemic, that's going to have to come with a whole lot of rules and guidelines for employers to prevent a potentially exploitative situation.
You're spot on, Daisy. I think the boundaries between work and life, you know, are suddenly very permeable. And I think that's going to be a challenge for all of us. Interestingly, France was in France, I think, fairly recently, where a law came in. You can't send emails out of work hours, and bosses can't do it. You know, as an express way to try and, you know, maintain this boundary. But look, I think overall, I mean, in the discussion, I think what Catherine raised is important, particularly, I mean, for both parties. But you think with the big battlegrounds in politics, those outer metropolitan seats, which swung so heavily to the Liberal Party, but, you know, I guess the traditional Labor seats. I mean, there's probably a majority of people that are the grocery workers, the shift workers. They're going to factories. They're at, you know, they're at the supermarket checkouts, and many of them will be more impacted, not in terms of just going to work, but not even having work through this COVID thing. So
100%.
they'll be, you know, there'll be a lot of challenge in getting their vote.
No, 100%. And of course, Catherine is absolutely right. This is a very, very privileged problem that we have here.